Hi, Ray. Welcome to Funnel Vision. Excited to have you on our podcast today. And we're going to chat a little bit about, PE, your experience as a C-suite leader, and dig into revenue stagnation and kind of that PE backed growth journey as well. So thanks for coming on today.
Thanks, Alana. I appreciate you having me on, and I look forward to our discussion.
Yeah. So starting with, this question is like, when revenues start to stall, leaders instinctively dive into numbers. What are some qualitative factors beneath the surface that often explain what's happening? And kind of funny because as before we started this conversation, we were just a little bit talking about that too, kind of as a just background conversation.
You're absolutely correct. And there are always a number of factors that will come into play when you see revenue starting to stall. Typically, revenue stalling is a lagging indicator. With that, what I've found is there's several qualitative drivers behind what usually leads to it. One of them, narrative decay. The sales reps get a little panicky if they're not hitting their numbers. They start to freeform and they kind of lose the point and positioning of whether you're selling a product, a service, or a hybrid. Manager entropy. The managers also are subject to a concern if they're not making their numbers, and they start going to the inspection. They start looking at the quantitative. Instead of coaching the team into a winning space. So it's kind of a death spiral once you get there, and you want to be sure that you let your managers know that, hey, if this is more of a coaching environment and less of an inspection environment, let's go on the offensive instead of the defensive. Always in any organization that I've been a part of, cross-functional friction. And what I mean by that is the different functions are operating as silos instead of a united island or a united set of states. So think about sales doing their own thing, marketing doing their own thing. If it's a product management doing their own thing, and just all the different silos, and people get focused on what it is that their job is instead of a collaborative effect to allow for success. And then, the biggest one, and this is really probably should have gone first, is that energy and urgency lost. You get into the middle of the year, you're in the doldrums, there's less precision in what you're trying to sell. There's more hedging. Well, this is probably going to come about, but it's not going to be Q2 as I first thought. It's going to be more like Q3 or Q4. And there's no real value prop behind what these folks are starting to sell. And it just kind of gets pushed down the road. Those are a few of the biggest ones that I certainly have experienced in a past life that are leading indicators into that lagging indicator, which is stalled revenue.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And kind of one of the things that you said too was like, that I just wrote down here is like narrative decay. And I think that's so interesting. I honestly have not heard that like term before, but it resonates with the kind of like, just like not like, you say the same thing and you kind of have this thing and it kind of just erodes, and like making sure that it's tight again. And like, how do you get around that? Or how do you what do you do to solve that?
That really boils down to getting the team together again, going back to the beginning of the year. And I'm going to use by example, you're at the end of Q1 as we are right now. We're at the end of Q1 and saying, look, what was it that we committed to at the beginning of the year? What was the messaging at the beginning of the year? This is why that was working. Where are we now with that messaging? Doing a little bit of role play of then, now, future state, and just kind of realigning with what that original thought process was and that messaging was. It's an easy thing to pull back into place. The problem is a lot of times C-suite is very guilty of this because they are so quantitatively focused. They don't recognize it till you're into Q2 And then it's a fire drill, right? Then it's, well, why didn't we recognize this earlier? So it's really just kind of keeping your eye on the ball and staying in touch with your team so that they understand and align with what that vision is.
Yeah. Yeah. Super, super interesting. And right. It sounds like it's very much keeping the vision alive, like you said, and that communication and kind of not having everyone siloed. Or just making sure that even if you are siloed, like that you are communicating and everybody has that like unified vision and is working towards the same goals and using the same narrative as well.
And that's a great point. Just as a, kind of a follow on, you hit the nail on the head. Communication. You talk to any organization, they can have the best laid plans. They can be the best run. If that communication breaks down, the whole plan comes unglued.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. In PE environments, like where performance is relentlessly measured, how do you balance hitting metrics while with building the underlying sales culture and leadership discipline to sustain growth within that, PE environment where everything is being measured every day?
You run parallel systems, right? You run a performance, what I like to call a performance-based system. And then you run a capability system. And that performance system, I'm going to divide it, as I've done by terminology, into two groups and what you're kind of managing towards. So the performance system, that's the PE, right? That's the PE group. That's the top of the mountain where they're worried about weekly forecasts, pipeline coverage, stage conversion, activity quality, and at the end of the day, for lack of a better term, putting points on the board, right? Because that's what's going to drive top line. That's what's going to drive your operating margin. And that's what's going to drive your EBITDA and your net profits. So that's what they're concerned about. But behind that, the qualitative side of it is the capability system. And that's with your field level teams and your mid-level managers. So it's deal reviews. It's coaching on calls. In most organizations that I've been a part of, you have a group call and then you have one-on-ones. It's training. And the training doesn't have to be sitting in an office environment or online for 4 hours. It can be 15 minutes. In fact, that's usually more effective on a weekly basis. And as we had talked about before, it's messaging and iteration of that messaging and making sure that you're on track. That capability system will drive those performance metrics. And if the top's happy, they leave the field folks alone so that they can make the top happy. But that's really what you need to do. You need to break it down into two categories.
Yeah. And that's a very interesting. And it kind of brings me to my next question, which is too, like in those high pressure settings where sometimes it seems like it's never good enough, how can CEOs separate like that external pressure from, PE, from like actual performance gaps without letting it derail confidence?
C-suite executives by design don't sleep at night, right? There's always a problem. There's always something that's going on, and that keeps them on pins and needles constantly. What I tried to do, and I tried to do it when I was on both sides of the desk, as I was working my way up, and then when I found myself into the C-suite, you disaggregate the signal versus the narrative, right? So you can never grow fast enough in a PE environment. You're always being pressured to grow. But what you need to do is take a couple of steps back and look at what the core drivers are. Has the win rate deteriorated? Has the deal size come down? Has the cycle time? So is it taking 4 months instead of 3 months? Is there a structural weakening in what's doing the day to day? Those are real world concerns, not just the narrative. Well, we're not growing fast enough, and we're not growing fast enough because, by example, the ops team lost, another 10% of business, which we didn't budget for. So it's looking at it from the perspective of, has anything changed? And if there has been something that's affected, that outside the budget, what we had expected, then you retool and then you again, you go into the realities and how you can tune that reality up. The other thing, internal consistency, the metrics tell a story from a numbers perspective, but as I had mentioned earlier, are the people doing anything different? Have they come off the rails? Is there a lack of energy? Are you turning folks? Is there a lot of turnover going on? Those are all different things you can look at. If the answer to that question is no, then again, it's just restaking what reality needs to look like to make up for that unforeseen loss. Process fidelity. You can use it as a diagnostic, and that is, are we executing on that original playbook? If not, why not? Or do we need to retune that playbook? And confidence and controllables. CEOs lose confidence quickly, I think on a weekly basis is my experience, because again, they don't sleep at night. It's reinforcing to that CEO that the process works. You should have confidence in the team. They've gotten you to where you are today, and they're going to get you to where you are tomorrow. We need you to lead by example, make quality decisions, be consistent in your approach, not knee jerk, and speed up the learning loops if we do need to retool, not overthink it, not the, paralysis through analysis.
Yeah. Yeah. And like what I'm hearing, like that you're saying too, is like, it's never good enough. Like these are kind of like broad, like, what does that even mean? So like going through and really figuring out like, what are the things that we're looking at, and just kind of making sure that they are on track versus like this, like bigger, like CEO, like it's not good enough, but like, what does that mean? Like breaking it down into all of the things that you've mentioned so that you can kind of check them off and be like, these are all the things. Each of those items is on track and we're doing the right things or tweaking what needs to be tweaked. So it's kind of like that, like, kind of bigger picture, like, oh no, like it's never good enough, but really looking at each of the things and like, what does that mean for each of those areas?
No, absolutely correct. And he's got a boss too, especially in PE. He's got an operating partner, and operating partners are constantly pushing. And the macro side of it is you don't know if there's another company in that portfolio that operating partner is trying to make up for. So there's some reading of the tea leaves, but if you stay the course and you help coach up to that CEO, things seem to work out in the end.
Yeah. Yeah. And so before, people see that revenue flattens, what are some like qualitative warning signs that show up inside the sales organization or leadership team or that go to market strategy?
Yeah, no, sure. There are plenty of them. I'm going to pick out several of the most obvious and that are consistent across all industries, regardless of whether it's a service or a product or a hybrid environment. The pipeline, right? The pipeline can look full, but it's weak. And what I mean by that is there are a lot of deals in there that have either sat for a while, aren't really part of the ICP, or just aren't going to ever close. So it's window dressing, right? It's numbers, but there's no opportunity to close it. There's no confidence that it's going to close. There's increased deal storytelling. So people are telling more and more stories instead of, I'm going to use a bad word, quantitatively demonstrating that there's evidence that a deal is going to close. So it kind of goes hand in hand with that pipeline. The avoidance by the manager to disqualify deals that just aren't going to work. Again, because he's trying to manage to numbers as well. And he's probably feeling the pressure. And you can see that, again, because the deals continue to linger and they're not closing, let's say, by example, in 3 months, which is where they typically close, and they're hanging out for 4 and 5 months. The conversations with the customers are more generic and less sharp. So there's no identification of pain points and how you solution through those. The marketing sales disconnect. I mean, those two departments filled with very, very different personalities, but need to work together in order to have success. And then the hiring bar. we start to accept good enough in the organization. So the talent pool starts to dwindle. You have turnover, you have retention issues, and then you backfill whatever that position is, or add somebody who's just mediocre instead of a star performer, or has the opportunity to be a star performer. Those are kind of, 5 or 6 of the highlights that you need to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, no, that is so important. And of course the hiring and just hiring good enough and that part of it, really resonates with me and what we do in our everyday, but just making sure that you're finding the right people, that you're onboarding them properly and doing all of the things to make sure that you've got the right people in those seats that are going to be those top performers. It can't let that slide, because that's, people are everything, and they're running the, kind of getting you every step of the way. So important to make sure that you've got those right people.
No, they are. And, regardless of how whiz bang hot AI becomes, you're going to need people to make decisions.
Absolutely true. When company is preparing for an exit, how do qualitative elements like leadership strength, sales process maturity, and organizational alignment influence that valuation beyond just the growth rate and numbers?
This resonates with the CEO, anybody who has equity in the organization. So on exit, they get and hit their waterfall, and even more so with the operating partner. And, depth, this speaks to valuation, right? This can be worth 1x, 2x additional valuation points, which are, again, critical to the waterfall and people being able to have a great exit once it's sold to either a strategic or a non-strategic. But the depth of leadership is critical. So I like to say you've got to be more than one deep. If one person leaves or goes on vacation or gets sick or retires, all the things that happen in today's world, do you have somebody who can pick up the ball and run with it? So being more than just one deep and being more than just an organization at the surface looks great. You start to go past that initial veneer and you see that there's consistency in leadership and that there are places that can backfill if any of those things happen with somebody when they leave. Sales process maturity. Are you walking the talk? Are you consistent in how you're approaching the market? Are you hitting the numbers? And that all comes down to the people you have on board, right? That they've bought in, they've done well, they've shown that they can hit the goals and hit the stretch goals. Again, that's another point when somebody's looking at it from a valuation perspective. Organizational alignment discussions are all of the different silos working hand in hand. They have a primary job, but the secondary job is ensuring that the company does well. And that needs to be everybody's message. We know what we need to do. We know we need to work with the different groups, but the end goal is that the company does well. Forecast credibility. You start seeing more and more of this now, with more and more things being pushed below the line with an adjusted EBITDA number, which is a bad word when you're on the buying side. But is that forecast credible? Are your contracts tight? Are there folks that are going to leave because the company is going to be owned by somebody else? So all of those things come into play and are built over time. And then the overused word cultural discipline, but it does exist. If they came in and talked to those people who are currently on board, are they going to say that they're going to run and jump from the ship? Or are they saying, we've really enjoyed what we're doing and we like the way we've gotten to where we are, and we plan on continuing to build the organization? Again, that speaks volumes to the buying audience and buys you a 1x or 2x multiple. So all of this is through discovery when they go through the diligence process, and important, very important. And you're starting to see it more and more often with the operating partners being more attuned to how important these things are beyond the quantitative focus on the numbers.
Yeah, so important. Thank you so much, Ray, for all of that like super valuable information and insights. Um, Tell us and our listeners a little bit about you, yourself, what you do, and where people can find you.
Sure. No, thank you. I am with an organization called Chief Outsiders. They're a group of approximately 131 of us. We focus on chief marketing officer and chief revenue officer type environments. So we're the folks that you can bring in either on a project base or on a fractional basis to help you either reorganize your revenue generation machine, marketing organization machine, because of what we were talking about here, and that's stalled growth. All companies go through it. We've got, again, 131 folks coming from big organizations bringing their ideas and their opportunity to build whatever it is that you're looking for or recalibrate to get you to where you want to be.
Wonderful. What's the best way for people to reach you on LinkedIn or your
LinkedIn,
website?
probably the website, Chief Outsiders website is the best way to reach out to me. Although, if you're more comfortable with LinkedIn, it's Ray Healy. It's very simple. Look me up. I'd love to connect with you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ray, for your time today. Appreciate it. This has been a wonderful conversation and appreciate all of your insights and experience.
Thanks, Alana.